It's probably the best thing for me to be doing, but good morning everybody, and very warm welcome to you. I'm speaking from Northern Ireland. Sam and Peter Sam's speaking from Somerset, I think, and
no,
Gloucestershire, sorry. Peter's in London, and Barbara Day is speaking to you from Prague. So very warm welcome on behalf of the Stephen Joseph Association Committee, and just to tell you a little bit about the Stephen Joseph Association and how it came into being. It was conceived, first of all, by a group of us who were alumni, or actually I wasn't. I'm a bit of a fraud, really, because I never really graduated from Manchester. I was at the university at the drama department right at the beginning with Barbara, and Stephen was the fellow in drama. And after 50 years or so, some of us had been in touch, of course. I'd gone off to Birmingham School of Art and then to the Slade and became a designer. But some of us kept in touch, and we came to realize that Stephen Joseph had been largely forgotten. And a group of us met, first of all, in 2017. At the Stephen Joseph Theatre in Scarborough, and it was the 50th anniversary of Stephen's death. Alan Ayckbourn very kindly came, and with his wife Heather, and we had a really lovely weekend. It was full of reminiscences, of course, because many of us hadn't met for over 50 years. And then we came to the understanding that, of course, you know, we could just all walk away from this weekend in the sunshine in Scarborough. It was sunny actually that weekend, and forget about the whole thing. But we sort of began to feel that Stephen was so important and largely forgotten, particularly by young people who work in the profession who had no idea who he was, that we really ought to do something a little bit more. So we conceived a symposium at Manchester University at the drama department, which Tony Jackson, who had been a student with Barbara and I at Manchester, helped to organize. And Tony had actually become Professor Emeritus at Manchester University in the drama department, so he had very good contacts. And we had a really extraordinary weekend in Manchester. And out of this, we started to think about how we could make our, you know, this very disparate group of people a little bit more organized. So we then kind of talked about forming an association, and a few of us became the founder members. And we hosted an AGM and a seminar at the V&A, at the Victorian Albert Museum, at the Theatre Performance Department at the end of 2017. And our guest speaker there was Sam. And out of this, and the papers that had been published, that had come out of the Manchester Symposium, we helped to finance a little booklet called Remembering Stephen Joseph. And we also created a number of other essays and other small publications to try to get a little bit more interest in who Stephen was and why he's so important. We also supported the acquisition of Terry Lane's archive of papers to the V&A. Terry Lane was not only a stage manager with Stephen and also a director, but he was the founding director of the Travis Theatre in Edinburgh. And he has this very rich archive of papers, many of which have never been seen before, and they're now at the V&A. So I suppose it's really important to talk about, why is Stephen important? Why is he important now? Well, He established theatre in the round, of course. He supported young and unknown playwrights, including Alan Ayckbourn, and oddly gave Harold Pinter the first opportunity to direct the birthday party in the round, which was actually an extraordinary production, apparently. And there are still some of our members who were actually part of that. But he did have an enormous concern for technical theatre. And Stephen I watched him once putting on a plug, and it was quite extraordinary, the dedication and the focus that he brought to putting on a plug. And he was like that with many other things. He was an educator, but he didn't educate. He was a director that never directed actors if he could help it. He usually sat behind a newspaper watching them until something interesting happened. But he also was one of the founder members of the Association of British Theatre Technicians. And it's the roots of the British Theatre Technicians that I think are really important, because it was always seen as a very, very broad organisation that would embrace not only technicians, but all members of the profession. And I think at this moment in time, it's probably more important than at any other moment in time for the profession to come together. You'll hear in the little video that we're going to play you in a few minutes, Richard Pilbrow, who is the only surviving member of the foundation member of the ABTT and one of our patrons, talking about how Stephen was also responsible for establishing the Society of Theatre Consultants. So 50 years after his death, it's worth investigating just how far-reaching and influential this largely forgotten theatre pioneer has been, and giving rise to the myriad forms of theatre and possibilities that would, under normal circumstances, be current today. So I am going to now ask Mig to press the button and show you the video. These recordings were made in Scarborough in 2017, but they've been edited and reconfigured for this. Enjoy.
'53, and he was associated with the stage management course. Now, only this last week, my partner, when I started Theatre Projects, a man named Brian Kendall, I met him last week, he says that Stephen actually started the stage management course. And must admit, I was never aware of that. He was around, but I thought he was mainly with the actors. And he was this very large, very charismatic character. I mean, he was a very powerfully built person and strong opinions, but I remember him mainly with the actors, many of whom adored him. It sort of all began because Vicky, my first wife, and I went to Berlin on a sort of holiday, and there was a conference of the International Organization of Backstage People, I forget what it's called now. And we met a group of people we'd never met before. And at this conference in Berlin was Fred Bentham, Strand, Peter Morrow, the architect, I think Sean Kenny, Ian Halbury, pretty interesting group of people. On the last day of the conference, we all went out for a drink at a bar, Berlin bar, with a group of Americans. And we all got to talking about how back home we never met our peers and compatriots, you know. So we resolved to go home and form an association of British theatre designers and technicians, and the Americans were going to do the same. And that became USITT, as we became ABTT. Anyway, we resolved to have this conference in June, which is sort of crazy, you know, to organize a whole international conference in 4 months, 5 months was absolutely madness, but we did, and it happened. And of course, Stephen published the transcript, you know, which is that. Where Stephen was truly pivotal was 2-3 years later. He had the idea to form a specific association for theatre consultants. And it's now, it was the Society of Theatre Consultants, it's now the Institute of Theatre Consultants. And that was entirely Stephen's initiative.
I think Stephen is an important figure in not British theatre, but world theatre, really. Much more important than he's ever given credit for. And it's a sadness, in a way, that we don't have enough evidence of his existence, really. I mean, only in the memories of people who worked with him and knew him. He wrote some considerable books about theatre forms, most of which are out of print. And there is a fear that he might well, in a generation or two, be forgotten. I work with actors now who have no idea whose name our theatre, the Stephen Joseph Theatre, the SJT, bears. They have no idea who it is. They might think he's a local industrialist or something. And it really is an important thing to tell them. And to tell them just what an effect he's had on future generations and the whole theatre form. He's instrumentally co-forming the ABTT, which was an organisation set up in order to pool the existing knowledge of theatre in all departments, technical, architectural, and artistic, is an important organisation, and he wanted a discussion about theatre form to be widened beyond the sort of narrow sniping of his day, with proscenium arches on the one hand and in the rounders on the other, when never the twain will meet. He really pursued open theatre, open staging, to an extent that has never been professionally explored in this country for many generations. So I think his value to current theatre thinking is much more than people are really aware of.
Thank you very much.
We still got Tate. You're muted.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed watching the video. I enjoyed both talking to Peter, to Richard Pilbrow, and also to to Alan Ayckbourn. Alan, in fact, when I filmed it in his little, in his, I'm quite emotional, sorry, watching that again. So forgive me. I filmed Alan at Long Westgate Street, which is his house, and had actually been Stephen Joseph's house. So, yeah. I was minded yesterday. I actually joined the ALD lighting seminar, which I found really fascinating. And not only were they talking about improving conditions for technicians, which is right and proper. I mean, when I first started as a young stage manager, I think I was getting £1 a week, and certainly no contracts or anything like that. But they were talking also about the color temperature of lights and LEDs and the difficulties. And I just, looking at the end of the little video, Stephen Joseph's very, very simple theatre in the round, and then the Scarborough Theatre with its, and the photograph of the lighting grid with all of that technology. And it's just very interesting to think about what the theatre was like 50, 60 years ago and what it's like now, and the relevance of Stephen Joseph within that. And so I'm now going to hand you over. I'm going to introduce, first of all, our panelists. There's Sam Walters, from probably not really needing any introduction to any of you. Peter Tate, who some of you, for his sins, not only an actor, but he's been foolish enough to open a new theatre. And Barbara Day, who is an extraordinary lady, who I've re-met, actually. One of the joys of this, putting the seminar together, has been getting to know Barbara. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce really to Sam Walters. And Sam, of course, was the founding director of the Orange Tree Theatre in Richmond. And he started life at university in Oxford, but then went on to direct at various drama schools and reps in the UK. And then in 1971, in an old pub in Richmond, 1971, isn't it? Gosh. He established the only and first permanent theatre in the round in London. And 20 years later, a new theatre was commissioned across the road, and it was designed by Ian McIntosh, who of course is a fellow of the ABTT. And from then onwards, the theatre's presented work of truly international importance. And of course, it now closed temporarily because of COVID-19, and hopefully it will survive the pandemic. But under Sam's directorship, the theatre won many awards, and including the prestigious Peter Brook Empty Space Award. And they did that 3 times. In 1989, Sam travelled to Moscow, Leningrad, and Prague, and he met Václav Havel. And he later produced the first performances of Havel's plays in English. And I guess, Barbara, that was where you and he first met, or perhaps you've been in correspondence before that, had you?
Round about that time.
Yes. So I'm going to hand you over to Sam. And he was hesitant about me letting you know, but he was awarded an MBE in 1999 for his services to the theatre. And after 42 years running the Orange Tree, he retired in 2014. But he's come out of retirement to speak to us today. Please welcome Sam Walters.
Thank you. Good morning. We live at the moment in strange and difficult times, when much seems to be hanging in the balance and changes in the air. If this virus is not under control, much may be improved by the experience, and we may have learnt to value that which we previously ignored or undervalued. But some things, on the other hand, will have suffered irreparable damage, and the theatre and other activities where people gather together might, it would appear, be in dire straits. Theatre, though, survived the 20th century, where first films and then television have seemed to pose a considerable threat. But now, with the 21st century, and perhaps with a more dangerous technology, has reared its head. We can be entertained at home, on our phone even, by a plethora of shows and films, and this can happen whenever and wherever we want and at our convenience. For we can record, and we can pause to make a phone call, or change our minds to continue the entertainment at another time. And the choice is enormous. And with the virus keeping us indoors, even theatres are finding ways for the new technology to bring their work into our homes as well. So, why on earth should we audiences go out on a wet, cold February night to sit in an auditorium with a lot of strangers to watch a live play? There's simply no need. The same quality of entertainment can be enjoyed in the comfort of our own homes. And now we can shop online, bank online, are encouraged to consult a doctor even online, even meet our friends and family. And with the current necessity of working from home, surely the habit of doing things at home will soon permeate every aspect of our lives. And here we are having a conference online from the comfort of our homes, and with one of us being beamed in from Prague. And if the older amongst us may have difficulty in mastering the new technology, or even like me, have a resistance to doing so, for the young, it will be, and even now is, second nature. And things do change, and sometimes disappear. We no longer travel by pony and trap. And although Morris dancing may be stumbled upon on a summer evening, it's hardly the activity it was. Sometimes, of course, pastimes get transformed, but not necessarily for the better. We no longer visit the lunatic asylums to gawp at the inmates for our entertainment, but instead we have reality television and Love Island. So, my question is theatre yesterday's art form? Clearly, those of us here think not. There are, though it seems to me, two possibilities ahead of us. One, theatre will die and be displaced by technology and the comforts of home. Or two, it will continue to thrive because we are basically gregarious creatures who want and need to gather together. Now, I'm here as one of the people representing, as it were, the Stephen Joseph Association under false pretenses, for I never met him. And having read quite a lot about him and by him, I'm not sure if we would have got on. But I have become a fanatical convert to theatre in the round. Why? Because it is the form of theatre most different from and most unrelated to watching a screen. For most of us, our first experience of theatre is a proscenium arch panto, and most of us will have worked first in that form of theatre. And of course, live theatre is different from film and television. But in a conventional theatre, the actors are on the podium, segregated from the audience, who sit in serried rows, looking ahead of them, unaware of those around them. But take a quarter of that audience and put it behind the actors, and take the next two quarters and put them on either side, and you have radically changed everybody's relationship to everyone else. The actors are now surrounded, and the audience see the play against a backcloth of fellow audience members. It's as though the audience have invaded the stage, or alternatively, that the actors have descended into the auditorium and created space for themselves. We've been forced into a relationship with one another, and the success of the evening will depend upon the interaction of all of us. And how liberating for the actors and director. For now they can move and act and play the scene as the scene demands, rather than pretending to do so while in fact playing in one direction only. And without the need to create a set for the audience to see the play against, everything can be done simply. And the director and designer, instead of designing a set for the play to be done in, can begin by saying, what do we need? Or even, do we need anything? So, Good for the actors because they can behave truthfully and really instead of artificially. Good for the author for those same reasons, and because the play can be seen and heard uncluttered. Good for the director because the production can be allowed to evolve naturally, something of which Stephen Joseph would, I understand, have strongly approved. But for ABTT members, it must be said, demanding on the stage management because the props and the set will be under close scrutiny, and the same goes for the designer. And demanding on the lighting because of the three-dimensional aspect of the production, for we are now involved, as it might be, with a sculpture that can be scrutinized from all sides, rather than a picture only looked at from the front. And most important of all, demanding of the audience, for they need to be involved in order to know where to look. The film director, of course, decides on that for them. They choose their shots and determine what the audience will see and when. And the end-on-stage director can place the actors in order to direct the audience attention. But in the round, where the performance is seen from all sides, the power lies with the audience. It is they who have to decide where they want to look or think their attention needs to be. Film, TV, mobile phones, computers deliver their images to a passive receiving audience. And in the Prosarch Theatre, an audience member may flock into row J and demand to be entertained after a hard day's work. But that won't work in the round. In the round, the audience must be active. Theatre in the round empowers the audience and makes demands upon it. And what is being created is a full communal shared experience. I thought at this point I would try to say some provocative things in relation to theatre in the round that many may not agree with, but which might stimulate discussion if you want. One, every play is better for being done in the round. Two, if there are problems, they can be solved. Three, often the solution to the problem is a real creative plus. I can give one particular example close to my heart if you want. Four, are there problems that can't be solved? I'm not going to tell you. Five, the question of who wants to spend good money to see Hamlet's arse simply never arises. Six, theatres in the round do need to be small so that the audience are close to the action, and that is a good thing. When I say seven, when I say theatre in the round, I do not include open stages or thrust stages. I mean with the audience surrounding the action. Three sides is rubbish. Seven, the round requires simplicity, not spectacle. Leave that to the films. Nine, sometimes having a small budget or even no money at all is a good thing. If theatre in the round is so good, I can hear people cry, why are there not more of them? Because we are lumbered with the theatre architecture of over 100 years ago, to say nothing of the social divisions that went with them. And then with the invention of electric lighting and the fire brigade, fewer theatres burnt down. And now they have preservation orders on them. And as they're in the majority, productions that are going to travel need to be created for the buildings that exist. And these theatres are big and they make money. But if technology might now be going to kill theatre, perhaps the only theatre that will have a chance of surviving is the one that creates a shared communal experience in total contrast to staying at home and watching a screen. So perhaps the technology that threatens and which we fear may kill us will in fact be what stimulates future growth. And if that happens, how are we going to make it happen? We are, of course, returning to our roots, for surely theatre began when the players simply arrived on the village green and people sat round in a circle and enjoyed the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, for a very stimulating and, yes, somewhat provocative comment about theatre in the round. I'm sure that many of you will have questions, and we've been asked whether there will be a transcript of this. and I will ask the panelists whether they're prepared to release anything that they've written. I'm sure they will. I want to now introduce Barbara Day. Barbara was a student at Manchester University in 1962 and 1965 to 65, and then she went to Prague, where she saw productions of Václav Havel's plays at the Balustrade Theatre. She returned to the UK and spent 3 years working at the Victoria Theatre, Stoke-on-Trent, with Stephen's protégé Peter Cheeseman. And in the 1980s, she returned to Czechoslovakia, and in 1985 arranged for the Open Stage Theatre on a String to appear in Britain. Since 1990, Barbara's lived and worked in Prague, and her experiences are recorded in her books, The Velvet Philosopher and Trial by Theatre. She received also an MBE for services to UK and Czech cultural relations in 2002. Barbara's not only a writer, but she's a theatrologist. And if you don't know what a theatrologist is, Wikipedia says it's somebody who studies theatrical performance in relation to its literary, physical, psychobiological, sociological, and historical context. So Barbara's going to now talk to you and explain theatrologist, I'm quite sure, and talk about theatre that's always at the beginning. Barbara Day.
Thank you, Alistair. It's a great pleasure to be here, and good morning to everyone. As Alistair said, I was a student of Stephen Joseph back in 1962, and when he directed the Bacchae in Manchester, I was one of the Bacchae. He had us using the whole space all the time. We were barefoot, turning and circling on the polished floor of the University Great Hall. And I realize now that the beginning of our study of theatre actually paralleled the beginning of theatre itself, the performers in a central space and surrounded by the audience. Stephen taught us, quote, "Theatre in the round is structured like life, and consequently movement organizes itself as it does in real life. In the circle, everybody is equal, and everybody has equal access to each other." But I think, as you'll have realized, he wasn't an in-the-round fanatic. He loved all kinds of theatre. He wrote a book called The Story of the Playhouse in England. But he realized how powerful theatre could be when the actor and the audience share the same space and respond to each other. When the audience become participants in the drama, not physically, but through their emotions and their intellect. So you could say that the space is the message. It's central and it's shared. Well, the time came to leave Manchester, and I had the opportunity to spend a year in Prague. Stephen told me to go. He said, "It's a place where interesting things are happening. You'll find a lot there." And I went, and he was right. I found myself in a country where theatre was at the center of cultural, social, and even political life. Prague was a city where everyone, more or less, went to the theatre and still does go to the theatre. And there are historical reasons, because in the 19th century, theatre played a major role in the Czech struggle for autonomy in a German-speaking empire. Between the wars, it flourished in what was now a new democratic and multicultural republic. Theatre supported Czech morale under Nazi occupation, and it even survived socialist realism. When I arrived in the mid-60s, theatre was at the beginning of a new era in which, as we've mentioned, the plays of Václav Havel played a major role. I saw the original productions, and I sensed how the audience understood every reference and reacted to every allusion. I realized that the Czech theatre spoke for and to everyone, that it was relevant to their daily lives. When I got back to England, I spent 3 years in the theatre that Stephen Joseph founded in Stoke, this time working with Peter Cheeseman on the local documentaries. It was a theatre where the audience literally brought their material to us, and it was the relevance of this material, combined with its presentation in the round, that confirmed a sense of community among the audience. Meanwhile, back in Czechoslovakia, in its second city, Brno, there was a company called Theatre on a String, which performed in an empty art gallery with virtually no resources. They weren't worried that they had, for example, no permanent lighting rig, no backstage facilities. They didn't even have a backstage. There was one entrance into the art gallery, and it was used by the audience, by the actors, and by the technicians. Every production was differently staged, a different layout defined by lighting, rostra, and by the audience seating. And by the 1980s, the Theatre on a String had built up a repertoire of works based on folk tales, classic novels, nonsense poetry, and other genres not usually associated with the theatre. I only have time to mention one of them, a dramatization of The Labyrinth of the World and the Paradise of the Heart by the 17th century Bohemian exile Comenius. Labyrinth of the World was staged in the round. That is, the acting space was a rectangle, seating on every side, and a long table or platform down the center. And when the audience arrived, when we got there, we found that all the seats were unavailable. They were covered by sheets. And we had to stand rather uncomfortably in the acting space, in the center of the space. This got more and more awkward as the space filled up and people became frustrated, especially those who had arrived early, hoping to have a choice of seats. Then the covers came off just before the performance was about to start. And there was a mad dash for the seats. People were elbowing each other apart, trying to get to the seats they wanted, absolutely ruthlessly. And then we settled down to watch the performance. And we began to be rather uncomfortably aware that the 17th century Labyrinth of the World was our world, that it had held up a mirror to our behavior, that it showed us how a short time ago we had been behaving like the people in the performance, struggling and fighting to get the best deal for ourselves. And every show by this company, some way, in a different way every time, asked the audience to question their own prejudices and their own priorities. So it was really no accident that this company became close to Václav Havel and created a network of theatrical opposition to the existing communism. These were companies who linked up with Theatre on a String, companies that were engaged with their audiences. And that network was critical to the success of the democratic revolution. Because in the turmoil of November 1989, it was the theatre people who provided the facilities for the huge outdoor demonstrations They provided the sound systems, the platforms, the dramaturgy, and the stewarding of the crowds. And when the communists held on to the news media, it was the actors who got in their cars and drove to the ends of the country to appear at the provincial network of theatres, where they were the only reliable source of information during the revolution. I think that Stephen would have loved this theatre. It possessed all the elements that he looked for: simplicity and spectacle, ritual and comedy, action and stillness, and above all, a relationship between the actor and the audience. He and they knew that the beginning of theatre is simplicity, and that is where it is at its most powerful. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you so much. We've got already some questions coming in that are responding to some of Sam's provocative comments. I'm sure he'll answer them at the end. Barbara, I agree with you that Stephen would have loved, absolutely loved, what you were all doing in Prague. And it just reminds me that Sam, when he talked at the V&A, he told us that he'd started in the pub without any lighting. He just performed in a space without any of the technology. And of course, Stephen actually, in one of his books, draws diagrams of how you light spaces in the round, starting with 4 lights, perhaps. Okay, we're moving on now to our final speaker of the morning. Peter Tate is both an actor and the co-artistic director of the Playground Theatre in West London. The theatre was converted from an old bus depot. It's in West London near Ladbroke Grove. And it was conceived by Peter out of a desire for theatre artists, for all artists in fact, to play and to have time to explore rather than to simply rush headlong into a kind of product. And so for many years it was used as a rehearsal space and a conceptual incubator. But in 2017, it's extraordinary how so many of these things all link up with 2017. It underwent a major refit, and it opened its doors, it reopened its doors as an adaptable theatre. So as an actor, Peter's played in many different kinds of spaces. He's played at the National Theatre. He's played very prominent parts all over the world, in fact. And he's worked in TV and with internationally acclaimed choreographers. But for him, I think his love really is his playground. And it was established to promote both established artists and emerging artists. And it's hosted productions from international and British companies and directors of great note. And I'm sure Peter's going to talk about that. But he has a real kind of, it's rooted in its locality. It's rooted in Kensington and Chelsea. And it's very, very interesting. We ran our last AGM there last year. And he's got this extraordinary cafe restaurant. And they, at the moment, during the pandemic, are providing food to local residents of the borough. So, along with so many of us at the moment, Peter's going to address and ask the really salient question: to carry on or not to carry on? Peter Tate.
Thank you very much, Alistair. As Alistair mentioned, I'm the founder and co-artistic director of the Playground Theatre in West London. I'm an actor, also a producer, and also, and very importantly at this time, a businessman. Now, I know little of Stephen Joseph, but from what I've gleaned, he was an independent and anti-establishment and a great influencer. Now, I certainly am independent. And from the point of view that establishments want conformity, then I'm also anti-establishment. Now, one of my inspirations was a great lady called Anna Sokolov. Now, she was a dancer and choreographer and theater dance maker. She was also fiercely independent and very anti-establishment. She was an original member of the Martha Graham Company, but left after a few years to create her own work. Now, she worked with some of the giants of the 20th century theater like Brecht, Tennessee Williams, and was the original choreographer on Hair, but she was fired about 1 week before the opening by Joseph Patt because they had a creative disagreement. She was also a founding member of the Actors Studio in New York, of which I am a member. Now, she inspired so many people, like Joseph inspired so many people. She inspired Jerome Robbins, Pina Bausch, Alvin Ailey, Martha Clark, and many others. Now, I was lucky to work with Anna at Juilliard, where she directed a piece that I wrote. Now, she was fierce, but it was always about the work. It wasn't about, I mean, of course it is about the individual, but it was always primarily about the work, and we had to serve the work. Now, to my mind, she was a great unsung genius, and I know that many view Stephen Joseph in that same light. Now, the theme of my talk is to carry on or not to carry on. Theatre and theatre artists find themselves in a very precarious situation, waiting for the word of the great white god Boris to give us life. All I can say is that I am determined to carry on. Now, to explain the roots of that determination, I have to go way back to the beginning of my professional life at the age of 18 as a window cleaner, which is worlds apart from the world I now exist in. But it was a fairly stereotypical job for a working class boy to end up in, and I accepted it without any real questioning. After a couple of years, I broke away from the company I was working for and started my own business and started to make money. And the whole pursuit was making more and more money. Now, this was not a cure for the isolation and loneliness and exclusion that I had felt all my life. This partially came from the racism that my Greek Cypriot father experienced coming to this country in the 1950s. So I'm very interested to see if George Floyd's death will lead to real and substantial change. I certainly hope so. Because of the isolation, I was very shy and incapable of holding a conversation without feeling trepidation. Then I received an incredible gift, although it did not seem so at the time. By now I had acquired a beautiful white Mercedes coupe, the trappings of the money I was making. Now, my general shyness was no different when I was attempting to meet young ladies. On one occasion, I was in Dulwich and went into a pub and met someone. I wanted to get her outside as soon as possible to see my car, as if the car was my personality. She got in and we started driving aimlessly towards the West End, and we drove for about 30 minutes with not a word uttered. Then she said to me, "Where are we going?" I stumbled, "I don't know." And then she said, "People like you are so boring. Take me home." I obliged again, without words. And when I dropped her off, I leant across for the obligatory goodnight kiss, and she slammed the door in my face. Now, the pain I felt at that moment was the catalyst for change. I knew that I could not carry on with the life I had. And so I needed to find a way to express myself, and through that to communicate in a meaningful way with those around me. I looked at all the people I knew, and I could see their lives mapped out in front of them. And I certainly did not want to go down that road. So I cut the umbilical cord to everything I'd known, which was a very scary thing to do, but I knew that I had to do it. Eventually, I drifted into some evening acting classes and found it interested, and then I was admitted to, for those of you who don't know, a drama school, Webber Douglas, which at that time was one of the most prominent schools in the country, but I hated it. I was going from one prison to another. There were so many games and manipulations. That's not what I was looking for. So I left after 18 months of a 3-year course and went to study directly with Stella Adler in New York, which was a breath of fresh air. For those of you who don't know of Stella, she was one of the 2 iconic American teachers, along with Lee Strasberg, who started the Actors Studio. Now, I lived and worked in America for 6.5 years as an actor. And then at the end of that period, my wife, Naomi, got an engagement with Lindsay Kemp in Italy for 4 months. So I came to London to be a little bit closer. Not long after that, I was invited into the National and ended up playing a leading role opposite Alan Bates at the Olivier. Now, towards the end of that period, I took a very legitimate concern to the powers that be, and because I dared to raise my head above the parapet, they threw the book at me, which effectively ended my national career. Now, I could see that even Alan Bates could not say what he wanted to say, and I thought, well, this is insane. I don't want to remain a child all my life. So, also at that time, one of the reasons I was really excited about being at the National was the National Theatre Studio, this place of play and experiment. But when I got there, I found that there was a real clique and my face didn't fit. I thought, well, this is kind of stupid. You never know, I might have talent, but who else are you excluding? And so the experience at the National really informed my later actions, and it was another gift. Now, a while after this, and feeling more excluded than ever, I went into a very dark place for about 3 months. And at the end of which a little voice said to me, Peter, you can stay in your pit of despair and wait for somebody who can give you a hand, or you can use your own strength to pull yourself out and get on with what you want to do. Now, I've always been, I had to make, to realize this, I had to make money. Otherwise, I would always be dependent on others, and I've never had a gift for asking people for money. So I picked up some window cleaning tools again and started another business. It was the only way I knew how to make money. And now it took me much longer than I thought, but I was determined. In 1998, I acquired Unit 8 in Latimer Road, as Alistair's already alluded to, which was a bus depot, which I found, and when I found it with the aim of providing a space for artists to come and develop work. I would have an open door policy, in contrast to my experience at the NT studio. The whole premise was the fact that someone like Van Gogh could paint very quickly, and Bautus, the Swiss artist, could maybe take 10 years to create a work. So we all work at different tempos. We all have, every one of us has unique experiences. Nobody's had Alistair's experience or Sam's or Barbara's experience or my experience. So it's how you filter that as an artist to make sense of that world. And somewhere, maybe you'll connect to others who, and if you go deep enough, you'll find a place where you do connect. So now I had between 50 or 60 artists there every year from as many disciplines as possible, because I wanted people to see different ways of working. So if an actor had never worked with a choreographer, there would be a choreographer who could maybe show them a different way. So it was all about the cross-fertilization of forms. It was, so each year we had, we gave full developments to about 4 projects, and we won the Samuel Beckett Award for Innovative Theatre one year, which that production went to the Barbican. we sent out work developed at the playground to the Hampstead, the Young Vic, the West Yorkshire Playhouse, which was co-development with John Caird's company. And I also brought over international artists like Henryk Baranowski from Poland, who was twice winner of Poland's top award as Best Director, and Russia's, Saulius Varnas from Lithuania, and Hideki Noda from Japan, who's now the head of or was the head of the National Theatre in Japan. And again, it was all about cross-fertilization. So it was a very fertile period, and one that I absolutely look back on with absolute fondness. It was about freedom. It was about searching for the unique voice within and pushing people to go beyond the stereotypical, to go beyond the fact that you had to try and please others. It wasn't about that. It was about finding the voice within. So then the crash came in 2008, 2009, and we were funded by a school renting our premises for 9 months of the year, and they went, so I had to wind the whole project down. And then came the question again, do I carry on or do I not carry on? I decided to carry on, and about 5 years ago, I decided to create a theatre, Fools Rush In, where wise men never dare to tread, without realizing how much work was involved. And since then, we have done many, many, many productions. We've worked, as Alistair said, with emerging artists and with many established artists like Stephen Burkhoff, who did his take on Harvey Weinstein, an interesting mix, of course, and Brian Cox, who directed the last play before we closed, Sinners, by Joshua Sobel. We've had theatre, dance, multimedia, puppetry, opera, had performances in Albanian, in Greek, in French and Russian. We're a totally flexible space and have actually had 2 productions in the round, Sam. So we are now, of course, closed and have been providing, as Alistair said, 500 meals a week to the vulnerable in North Kensington, and continuing with our Well-Read program, which was started with the mental health unit at St. Charles Hospital, where we would take in plays for them to read so that they could start to engage with the outside world, which then went into another program called Well Written, where they create their own work. And we've had them perform at the playground. And as far as therapy goes, it's fantastic. Now, over the last few years, I've had many offers to buy the playground from developers because of something RBKC did. And then, but I cannot get away from the reason that I first found my way into theatre. It came from a need to express and communicate at a deep level. I also remembered stumbling across works like Scriabin's poem of ecstasy, as if I were the first person ever to hear it. And that excitement is still with me. And that's why it will give me so much more than money ever can. And that is why I will carry on and absolutely determined that we will reopen as soon as possible. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much. Thank you to all our panelists. I'm sure, I mean, I just wondered earlier this morning whether if we all switched off our mutes and we all clapped, what it would sound like. So maybe we'll try that at the end. So, I'm going to hand you now to Meg, who has, and before I do that, I just want to thank both Meg and Alicia, who have brought this whole series of seminars together. They've done an extraordinary job, and they could do without people like me causing them aggravation. But nevertheless, they brought this together, and I think it's really interesting that so many people from the ABTT have, I hope that, I don't quite know what the numbers are, but I know that the many of our own members have joined the seminar, but the extraordinary number that have actually come for this seminar, I think is really interesting, and I'm really pleased that you have all come, and hopefully you'll have found that the presentations by Sam, Barbara and Peter not only stimulating, and I know some of you have found some of the things that they've said rather provocative. So I'm going to hand you over to Meg, who has got a number of questions that might be of interest. So Meg.
Thank you, Alistair.
Lovely. So we are going to just start at the top, if that's okay. Do you think that the earliest theatre unearthed this week was in the round? From the photos, it looks like it. I don't want to get this pronunciation wrong. Alistair, you may be able to get that name.
Pena Williams. And Pena was actually an actress with Stephen in the very earliest productions, and she actually was in Harold Pinter's Birthday Party, which Harold directed.
So he hasn't actually directed that to anyone in particular, so I don't know if anyone would like
So I
to.
don't know if Pena's online, but you might like, is it all right if somebody comes in, or is that a problem?
I'm afraid they can't do that, Alistair, on the webinar platform. So,
I mean, does anybody know
you
whether
can talk to us in the chat function. You can engage with us in the chat function. But
does anybody know whether this this Theatre on Earth this week was in the round? I don't.
Does anyone else?
Sorry.
That might have to be one that we get back to you on. So lovely. Okay. Sam, would you comment on Promenade and also and so-called immersive theatre in relation to In the Round?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Promenade is, of course, an extension in a way of Theatre in the Round. I did try to do one once, but the Orange Tree Theatre was so small, everybody just came and sat down and stayed where they were. So nobody promenaded. So you do have to have the right space that can get people up on their feet and make them move around. But yes, I think Promenade could be very exciting. I wish I had worked in it successfully rather than unsuccessfully. Although I think perhaps you have to make allowances for very old people. We have a gallery at the Orange Tree, so people who wanted to sit down could sit upstairs. People who wanted to promenade could sit downstairs, but they didn't promenade. Yes, and immersive theatre. Yes, I think they are in a way extensions of Theatre in the Round. There's a Theatre in the Round on all four sides or all round is a formal theatrical structure. And the freest of those, but going to Promenade or immersive theatre would be a development. Yes, that'd be terrific.
I completely agree. I think that those two lend themselves very well to that format of In the Round. I do quite a bit of immersive and Promenade work. But
I think that it may be worth asking Barbara to chip in here, because, of course, she mentioned that Stephen was really interested in all forms of theatre, and I think. It's certainly been my own view that whilst not perhaps the first person to think theatre in the round in Great Britain, it was from this that all sorts of other things began to emerge. I think what we have to remember about Stephen is that he broke the theatre out of the proscenium in the 50s and 60s. Theatre was very, very largely proscenium based.
Yes, but he wasn't against proscenium. I wanted to mention his book, The Story of the Playhouse in England, where he covered different types of staging. And in the introduction to Actor and Architect, he gives, that's the one, he gives a very enthusiastic description of the Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza. I remember, you must have been there for that, Alistair, the Devils that we took to Parma. And that was set in a traditional Italian opera house. But he treated the stage in a very flexible. He liked movement. And I think this is the thing that you can do in Theatre in the Round. You can do things like journeys, you can change the venue, you can change your scene very fluidly and flexibly. But I would say that Sam is actually a much stronger advocate for Theatre in the Round than even Stephen.
Oh, that's good.
Sam, there's a question here that from Sebastian Barnes saying, although I recognise the unique nature of theatre in the round, surely not all forms translate to this form. And then he goes on to say Pepper's ghost effect wouldn't be possible in the round. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, me? Yeah, well, you've not the ghost effect that you would have in a proscenium arch theatre, but you find your own different solution. I don't agree that all forms of, no one written in the round, if you go back to Shakespeare or Chekhov or Ibsen or Strindberg or John Osborne, they didn't write for the round. So, but I think all forms of theatre can be done in the round. There are, and I did say in one of my questions, are there any problems that can't be solved? And I wasn't going to tell you. There's one problem that I think a sort of ideal idea that is difficult is if the whole audience should see the same thing at the same time in the same way. That's quite a difficult thing to work out how to do. But people said to me, oh, you can't do farce. I love farce. You can't do a French farce in the round. It's got all these doors. And it does have a lot of doors. And I thought, I'm not going to let that stop me. And I have since done about 8 or 9 what we call our doorless farces. And you have the stage manager in the corner doing the knocking. You have an imaginary door, and there are some actors who can make that the door becomes another character in the play. And you find that not only can you cope with the problem of not having the doors, you've got something in addition to the doors. You've got these doors, people can fly through them, kick them shut. I had a stage manager who also had to bark like a dog as well as doing the doors at one point, because we imagined that we had a dog, it was a toy that had to make a noise. We didn't want to have a tape recorder. I thought, well, she's doing this and opening the doors, she can bark. She got put up for a stage management award. I'm afraid she didn't win it, but she should have done, because it's just beyond the call of duty, I think, to have to do all the door sound effects and bark like a dog. So there isn't anything that you can't. There are problems that you have to solve. Where do you put the musicians? Where does Hedda Gabler go to shoot herself? But you can solve them in your particular way, and your solution may bring something unique and different and exciting to the production.
I love that attitude, Sam. Brilliant. You can come and work with me in my department. I love that.
Right.
It can be solved.
Right. Is that at Guildford, is it?
Yes, yeah, well, I still work on site as well, so that's my attitude. We'll find a way. There's always a way.
Yes.
In your opinion, will coming out of our current situation of theatres going into administration, lacking of funding and the need to recoup what has been lost, encourage more change in theatre use, or go in the direction of more commercial, what will sell well route? What will sell well route? That's not particularly directed to anybody, so if anybody wanted to tackle that one. It's quite a vast one. Do you want to ponder that one, and I'll leave it up there? It's by an anonymous person. I'm going to leave it up there, but I'm going to move on because it's quite a vast question, so I'll let them consider that one. There's a lot about COVID-19 here. So there's one specific to Peter. So, hi Peter, how are you currently sustaining the theatre's weekly expenses, for example, salaries, bills and fees? What is the current government position on helping privately owned theatres?
Yeah, well, we are a charity also. We did receive 25,000 from the government via the local council. We also just managed to get an Arts Council grant of nearly 35,000. We have a similar application into the London funding body. So, I mean, we built up an okay reserve. So we're slightly living off of that. But I think basically we can survive until the end of the year, as we are keeping 2 full-time staff on and paying for other external services, etc. So we're okay till the end of the year, and we certainly hope that if possible we could start maybe at the end of September, because we've worked out how we can socially distance everybody. Lucky enough, it's a huge warehouse where the theatre is housed, so there's plenty of space. I mean, it's not like the Fimbra, for instance, where it will be, I don't know how many people I think it's about 50 as it is, and they could maybe get 10 people in. I mean, it's in the long run, it's obviously not sustainable financially, because companies who come to us will not want to pay the full rent. But I think we'll be okay till the end of the year, and hopefully between now and the end of the year, we'll get a certain amount of revenue in, which will take us well into New Year. So we're kind of okay at the moment.
Lovely. So I just wanted to, we're carrying on, we've still got 15 minutes, but I just wanted to let you know you've got 13 open questions. So it would be lovely to try and churn through as many as possible. There's really interesting ones here. There's a really interesting one here, because I've actually seen some of these myself, and I'd love to know your opinion on it. Given the effects of COVID-19 on the theatre industry, is there room for theatre as a shared experience to embrace technologies such as Zoom to recreate participatory theatre experiences? I've seen a few myself, actually, so I'm fascinated to, I've been online and had a look at them, so I'm fascinated to know what you think about that.
I think the theatre has been very inventive in what it's been doing. It's in the Czech Republic, they're facing a similar situation. And one of the ideas that took place at the beginning of May was a festival of nothing, for which everyone was invited to buy tickets. It appealed to the public and was an involvement, I think, of audiences to keep them in touch with their theatres.
But it mustn't be, it can't replace. I mean, having this discussion like this is fine. It's good that it takes place rather than not, but it doesn't replace actually people getting together. So there's a slight worry that theatres are allowing their work to go into people's homes, because you think, are you shooting yourself in the foot? Is there a danger of people saying, oh, well, it's rather like everything going on film at the National Theatre, where you'll get big film stars who'll do it because it'll be a very short run, and once it's on film, well, people can see it. It's wonderful that people living miles from the National can see the productions, which they wouldn't otherwise see at all, but the danger is that that then replaces what it is, that it, in the moment it's supplementing or helping, and therefore that would be disaster.
Yeah.
Lovely. So do all forms of theatre need to go back to more simpler forms?
Yes.
I haven't even finished. Lovely. That's one done.
You answered it, you mentioned it before.
Cool. Okay.
That question.
No problem.
I should have said yes.
What do you think about opening back? What do you think about opening back the theatres with social distancing measures, not only for the audience but also for the performers?
Oh God.
Well, if you have social distancing measures in place also for the actors, and that means actors staying 2 meters or 1 meter apart, then very difficult. Very difficult. Very difficult.
We're going to tackle some of those in the some of those implications in the health and safety one at the end of the day, which I know has sold out, but we're going to stream live on Facebook. So I think that those questions are still very much open, aren't they? Like, we don't actually know the answers to that, but there are some people that are beginning to do it. So the Opera House is staging some live things, but not to a live audience. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle the cast and the social distancing measures that need to be in place. So
in the ballet world, it would be interesting to see a pas de deux being done without the dancers.
Actually, they are doing that, Sam, apparently.
Are they?
Apparently so. So I'll be fascinated to know. Emma Wilson is talking to us about that later. So that would be.
You have to create an electricity between Romeo and Juliet, which will keep them apart, but nevertheless be very, very attracting.
So Sam, what are your thoughts on Leicester Curve and opening up the backstage? And on a side note, please could you introduce us to the Teddy next to you? Thank you.
He's the Teddy next to me. His first appearance in the theatre was Taste of Honey, Lincoln Rep, 1963, where my wife was playing Jo in A Taste of Honey. He's been with us ever since and has acted in various plays. He's never played the bear in Look Back in Anger, have you? No, you'd like that, but he's retired now. He's a senior member of a large collection of toys. What was the question? The serious question?
Your thoughts on the Leicester Curve and opening up backstage?
No, I haven't quite followed it. What have they done?
I don't know. That's it. So, what's your thoughts on Leicester Curve and opening up the backstage? So, I will ask Amy if she could expand on that a little more, and we'll come back to it maybe in the chat. So that's not a problem. The other thing is that Sam put the teddy there in homage to my teddies that are in the corner.
Yes, yes, yes. I was inspired by Mig's teddies.
We are defying the rule of bookshelves in the background.
Things just come up from an actor who did a lot of work with me, and they're saying Ted always gave Sam the best notes. He used to come to their run-throughs, and I'd say, "Well, he's going all right," and he was wisdom.
Oh, so I've got an interesting one here. Do your students, performers, designers, scenic costume LX, have sufficient opportunity to experiment with theatre in the round staging as well as other forms of staging? Do any of you feel like you can answer? I mean, as an educator, I can answer that and say that at the Guildford School of Acting, we have a multi-diverse space that we can have end-on, thrust.
Yeah. And do you work how often do you work in the round in that adaptable space?
We do thrust an awful lot, but we do. It's as often as it's an option that can be explored. So it's never not put on the table, if that makes any sense.
No, the exciting thing for a designer is that you are asking the question: do we need anything to do? The best designers you work with are the ones we're doing Hamlet. Do we need anything? Perhaps we need a chair, and you build up slowly. I remember very clearly a designer watching me directing a farce as it happens, and he just said, because he could be in rehearsals a lot, and he said, isn't the desk in the wrong place, Sam? I mean, instead of being here, if the door was there and the desk was there, it would open things up and what you're finding difficult would become. And I said, you're right, Tim. You're absolutely, move the desk. Now, you almost certainly can't do that if you've got a set designed and you're in a conventional theatre. So I think for designers to experience working in the round, this would be very liberating and exciting, because it can have an evolutionary side to it in the course of the rehearsals, and liberating and involve them much more. But it's very demanding. I once had an actress whose smell was reviewed. That's very good about the rounds. The audience is so close, of course, in the round. And she put on the right patchouli oil for the part she was playing. Her smell got quite a lot of reviews. So there are lots of benefits.
It's really important as well in the teaching method. So I teach lighting. So if we always just did end on, I would never be able to teach my students the art of lighting in the round.
And it's so challenging in the round, because of course, where you might have one spot on a character, you've now got to have four. They're going to move around. And you've got to be, you either have your four lights, which is fine, or you have quite the complicated rig that Scarborough has up there now. And you need it's a different skill, because you've got to light them all round, and you've got to try not to light the audience, who are very close as well.
So somebody has asked about live theatre and being able to watch it online. I hope that Sam has given his opinion on that. So Alistair, you're muted, but yeah, make sure you unmute. You're muted, Alistair.
You're muted, Alistair.
If we're really confined to 11:30, can we run over?
We can't, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry.
If you don't mind, I think we have to curtail any further questions.
You can go on for a little longer, that's fine. How does theatre in the round affect the audience when they first experience it and find themselves looking at fellow patrons on the other side?
They grow to love it very quickly.
Lovely.
Yes, it's an issue, but it usually ends up being a positive one, I think. But it is certainly an issue. It's different, and they think, oh my heaven, and it can be off-putting, of course, but on the whole, it can be creative, and they can bounce off each other. It's a shared experience. So I've had very few people who say, I'm not coming back here. I don't like that. I don't want to see. But of course, an actor like Olivier was fixated on the idea that the idea that a member of the audience might see another member of the audience when the Olivier was being designed, I believe, and curving round in a bit of a Greek-like way. But no. No member of the audience must see past an actor to another member of the audience. We must not have that. So it certainly was something of the past. It was considered anathema that should be the case. And there are certainly actors who would say, Richard Pryor said to me, oh, I like them there, Sam. I like them where I can see them. I want them to, if I raise an eyebrow, they can all see it. If I wink, they're all... Of course, that has gone. You don't have that command of the audience that Olivier and Richard Pryor might have wanted. But I've forgotten the question I'm talking about.
I'm actually, it's not that I'm going to stop you, but Amy has come to, I'm going to end on this one, but she's updated that question about the Leicester curve. So thank you. Leicester curve at the beginning and the end of shows show the backstage by opening the walls, showing the backstage in the wings. I wondered if this was of interest to you and whether this can be explored in all performances, but you'll have to make it quite swift. But I was just curious to know that question. Thank you for expanding on that, Amy. As a backstage person myself, I think that's fabulous, but I don't know how logistical that is. They obviously have fancy...
But don't you want to keep your secrets in the pros arts? You keep your secrets, don't you?
Yeah, there is an element of that. I'm not sure how... I definitely elected to work backstage for a reason. I don't know how daunted I would be at being presented in front of all of them, but it's an interesting... it's a concept though, isn't it? I don't think it should be a prerequisite that we do it all the time.
No.
Maybe.
I'm going into the dressing room, and let's see you in your underpants.
Listen, it pains me to stop you because it's been such an honour to be here and listen to you. But unfortunately, we've got such an ambitious schedule all day. Alistair, the questions are still there, so if there are anyone that you want to tap answers to as I do my outro speech, you'd be more than welcome to do that.
Well, thanks for that. I just want to say thank you to you, Megan, and to Alicia, but I want to point out to everybody that's online that next year in 2021, it's the 60th anniversary of the inception of ABTT, and it's the centenary of Stephen Joseph's birth. And we hope by then, of course, that life will have returned to something like normal and theatres in whatever form will be thriving again. But I'd really encourage those of you that have come online this morning who are not already Stephen Joseph Association committee members to join. If you're a member of ABTT already, you can do that without any additional fees. But we really encourage as many of you as possible to join us to help to shape events and projects for 2021 because, well, it's my view, it's a particularly personal view, but I think that Stephen Joseph was a genius. He's been largely forgotten. I think he's as important as some of the other greats that we acknowledge in our theatre world. And I think we owe him a huge debt of gratitude because I think without people like Stephen Joseph, we would not be having this seminar today. We would not be confronting questions of what is theatre, what shape is it going to be post-COVID. And so join the ABTT. All you have to do is get in touch with Alicia, join the ABTT and the SJA. That's even better. So get in touch with Alicia.
About that now, actually, in my outro. But yeah, so it just remains for me to say thank you very much.
I've got one more thing that I want to say, Meg, please. And I'd like to read just very, very briefly something that confronted Stevens in the 1950s. He said, "What use is the theatre, or any other art form for that matter?" And then skipping to the end of it, you can all see this in your little brochures, which you'll get online. Do you know what's the greatest noise in the universe? The laughter of an audience in response to great comic acting. The unique signal of humanity. Proof that we're still concerned with fate, still capable of love and pity, still aware, even of the meaning of suffering. Oh yes, at fault, but not blind to a divided world, and perhaps not unwilling to do what we can, what little we can, to do to help.
Great ending.
Even Joseph.
So yeah, thank you very much to our panelists. A big thank you to Alicia, who's been firing such fascinating additional information in the chat for you to go and follow up on. It's really important that I thank the Guildford School of Acting and the University of Surrey. They have lent us this very expensive webinar platform and been so supportive of all of the work that we're doing at the ABTT. Today's session, and indeed this series of seminars, have been brought to you by the Association of British Theatre Technicians. We find ourselves in very strange times with our industry very much closed. Our hope with these events was to bring us all back together to brainstorm and discuss. Our trade organisations, more so now than ever, need your support. And if you'd like to know more about how to join the ABTT as a member, a link has now been put into the chat, or you can just go and have a little look at our website. We have a wide range of different memberships available for new practitioners and for students, and we would wholeheartedly welcome your participation and support. Being a part of the ABTT, I can advocate, is very much like joining a family, and you can join in as much as you like or as little as you like. We also have a donate button in the drop-down menu of our website if you would like to support the work that we do and help us to continue doing things like this. Thank you very much for joining us today. We wish you all very well. We very much hope to see you again soon, perhaps not in a Zoom box, perhaps at the show next year or in a theatre somewhere. But it's been lovely to have you all with us. Unfortunately, it's all very abrupt. When I push end, everything just ends. But it's been lovely to see so many of you with us, and hopefully we will see some of you later on in some of the other sessions. Thank you very much.